I used to believe the climb itself was the answer, that if I could just reach higher, speak louder, be seen more, the ache inside me would finally quiet down. Success felt like proof that I was doing something right, but peace kept slipping through my fingers. I told myself I knew God because I spoke his name when things worked out. I thanked him when doors opened and stages filled. I thought that was faith. I didn't realize how shallow my understanding really was. There was a moment when the noise faded, when the lights shut off and the crowd went home. I sat alone, surrounded by everything I once prayed for, and still something inside me felt unfinished, unsettled, restless. That's when the whisper came, soft but heavy, not loud enough to scare me, but strong enough to stop me. It said, "You're full, but you're not fulfilled." And I couldn't argue with it. I looked at my reflection and didn't recognize the man staring back. He looked confident, successful, admired, but behind his eyes was a quiet hunger no applause could feed. I realized I had been confusing achievement with purpose. I was chasing validation and calling it destiny. I had mistaken movement for direction and noise for meaning. Every win made my ego louder, not my soul calmer. Every milestone raised my standards, not my gratitude. And without noticing, I had slowly placed myself at the center of everything. I wasn't denying God, but I wasn't surrendering to him either. I was asking him to bless my plans, not shape them. I wanted control with a touch of faith, not faith with full submission. That question followed me everywhere after that night, in cars, in dressing rooms, in crowded halls. Who are you really serving? And no success could drown it out. That was the beginning of the unraveling, not a fall from the world's eyes, but a collapse inside my own heart. And it forced me to confront a truth I had avoided for far too long. I remember sleeping in my car, waking up with stiff bones and stubborn hope. An old suitcase held everything I owned, and fear sat in the passenger seat. I told myself this pain was temporary, that hunger was just a chapter, not the whole book. Back then, I made a promise to myself under the quiet night sky. I said if I ever made it out, I would never feel this powerless again. I believed hard work could outrun fear and determination could silence doubt. I clung to my gift like it was a guarantee. I told myself talent was my safety net, my protection from falling too far. If I jumped, I believed it would always open in time, and for a while it did. Doors opened when I knocked, and sometimes before I even reached for the handle. Opportunities stacked up so fast I barely had time to breathe. I went from surviving to being seen. My voice reached rooms I never imagined entering. People listened, trusted me, applauded me. Each success felt like confirmation. I told myself this was proof that effort alone controlled outcomes, that discipline, focus, and hustle were enough to shape destiny. I started measuring life by results. Wins meant I was right. Losses meant I needed to push harder. Either way, I stayed convinced the steering wheel was firmly in my hands. Slowly, control became my comfort. Planning every move made me feel safe. Predictability felt like faith, even though it wasn't. I stopped noticing how tense my shoulders stayed, how sleep came easier when things went well and vanished when they didn't. My peace had conditions, and I didn't question that. I began to believe blessings were transactions, that if I worked harder, I deserved more. Gratitude quietly turned into entitlement, and I didn't hear it happen. I told stories about struggle, but I no longer trusted surrender. I respected God, but I relied on myself. I asked for help only after exhausting my own strength. The truth is, control felt holy to me. It looked like responsibility, discipline, wisdom, but beneath it was fear, fear of losing everything again. I didn't realize how fragile my confidence really was. It stood on success, not certainty, on outcomes, not trust. The illusion worked as long as nothing shook the ground beneath me, as long as life followed the script I wrote in my head. But scripts don't survive storms. And when the moment came that exposed how little control I truly had, everything I built my identity on began to tremble. That's when the real test started. Then life interrupted my confidence without warning. No rehearsal, no safety net, no chance to rewrite the moment. One breath, one mistake, and everything I thought I controlled slipped out of my hands. It happened in front of the world, not behind closed doors, not in private failure, but under lights so bright they burned. I felt exposed in a way success had never prepared me for. I realized my words couldn't outrun the moment. I tried to correct myself, to stand upright while my insides collapsed. Millions watched me stumble, and I felt every eye like a weight on my chest. In that instant, my reputation felt fragile. Years of work seemed to balance on a single breath. I wondered if everything I built could vanish just as quickly as it arrived. Fear rushed in before logic could catch up. The kind of fear that tightens your throat and makes your hands cold. I wasn't afraid of embarrassment. I was afraid of being erased. Shame followed close behind, not loud but heavy. It whispered questions I didn't want to answer about who I really was without approval. I replayed the moment again and again in my head. Every pause, every word, every expression. Sleep didn't come easily after that night. For the first time in a long while, I felt small, not humbled in a poetic way, but stripped. I couldn't hide behind confidence or charisma anymore. I waited for the fallout, for the calls to stop, the doors to close, the silence to swallow me. I braced myself for judgment I couldn't escape. And in that waiting, anxiety took root. My mind raced ahead to futures I couldn't control. I realized how dependent my peace had become on public approval. That's when a hard truth settled in. Fame doesn't protect you from fear. It doesn't soften mistakes. It amplifies them. I had believed success was armor. That status would cushion the blow when I fell, but all it did was make the fall louder. In that moment, I understood how exposed my soul really was, without applause, without praise, without certainty, just me and my fear. I wasn't facing the crowd anymore. I was facing myself, and I didn't like how much of my identity rested on being admired. That breaking point cracked something open inside me. It didn't destroy me, but it forced a reckoning. And from that crack, a deeper question began to rise. When the noise finally died down, I was left alone with my thoughts. No cameras, no applause, no role to play, just silence pressing against my chest, asking questions I couldn't ignore anymore. That silence exposed something uncomfortable. I had built my confidence on what I could manage, control, and predict. And now that control had cracked, so had my certainty. I began to notice how often I said I did this and I earned that. How rarely I paused to ask why some doors opened while others stayed locked. I had mistaken momentum for meaning. In that stillness, I started to understand Qadr in a way I never had before, not as an abstract idea, but as a living truth. Every rise and every stumble had been measured long before I claimed credit for either. It humbled me to realize that my talent was never the source. It was a trust, something placed in my hands, not something born from them, and trust can be taken back. I saw how easily I praised God when things went right, but when things broke, I panicked instead of reflecting. That imbalance revealed where my reliance truly lived. Sabre slowly took on a new meaning for me. It wasn't just about surviving discomfort or waiting for relief. It was about staying steady when answers didn't come right away. Patience meant sitting with uncertainty without trying to force control back into my grip. It meant trusting that delay wasn't denial and that silence wasn't abandonment. I also began to understand tawakkul beyond words. I had always worked hard, but my heart leaned on outcomes instead of Allah. I relied on effort more than trust. True reliance didn't ask me to stop striving. It asked me to stop obsessing, to do my part fully, then release the result without fear. That release felt strange at first, almost irresponsible. But slowly, it brought a calm I hadn't felt in years. I stopped waking up anxious about what could go wrong. I started waking up grounded in what already was. Breathing felt easier when I remembered I wasn't carrying the weight alone. I realized faith wasn't a backup plan for failure. It was the foundation I should have been standing on all along. Everything else was built too high and too thin. For the first time, my prayers shifted. They weren't about protecting my image or preserving success. They became quieter, more honest, more surrendered. I wasn't asking for control anymore. I was asking for clarity, for alignment, for a heart steady enough to accept whatever was written. That awakening didn't happen all at once. It unfolded slowly, gently, and it prepared me for the next step. Letting go of who I thought I had to become who I was meant to be. Letting go didn't happen all at once. Control had wrapped itself around my identity for years. Releasing it felt like loosening a grip I didn't realize was cutting off my own breath. I had to confront the belief that my value rose and fell with people's opinions. That applause defined me. That silence erased me. Facing that truth was harder than any public mistake. I started to notice how fear followed reputation everywhere. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of being forgotten, fear of not being enough without the spotlight. Those fears weren't random. They were signals, mirrors showing me where I still placed myself at the center of the story instead of Allah. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I realized how often I said, my career, my legacy, my success. I carried those words like they belonged solely to me. But nothing I had was truly owned. It was entrusted. Submission began when I stopped arguing with reality, when I accepted that some things would never bend to my will, that my plans were always provisional, never final. At first, that surrender felt like loss, like stepping back instead of forward. My ego resisted, whispering that I was shrinking, not growing. But something unexpected happened in that surrender. The noise inside me softened, the pressure to perform eased. I felt lighter without the constant need to prove myself. Peace didn't come from fixing everything. It came from accepting that I didn't have to, that my responsibility was effort, not outcome, intention, not control. For the first time, I allowed myself to say, I don't know, not as defeat, but as honesty. And in that honesty, faith finally had space to breathe. Submission stopped feeling like weakness. It revealed itself as courage, the courage to trust Allah's wisdom over my limited sight. I began to move differently through the world. Slower, more attentive, less reactive. I listened more than I spoke, even to my own thoughts. My ego had once guarded every corner of my life. Now I saw how exhausting that had been, how much energy I wasted protecting an image that was never permanent. In releasing that image, I discovered strength I didn't manufacture, a steadiness that didn't depend on praise or protection. It felt anchored, not inflated. I understood then that divine strength enters where ego exits, that grace fills the spaces control once occupied, and that transformation doesn't shout, it settles quietly. That inner shift didn't end my struggles, but it changed how I carried them. And with that new posture of surrender, I was finally ready to live, not perform. Now when I speak, my voice comes from a quieter place. I'm no longer trying to impress the room or protect an image. I speak from what life has stripped and rebuilt inside me. I've learned that performance can sound like wisdom, but it doesn't heal anyone. Experience carries a different weight. It moves slower, but it lasts longer. I've worn success like a tailored suit, polished and admired. From the outside, it looked complete. Inside, it felt hollow when gratitude wasn't stitched into it. That's when I understood how easily achievement can distract the soul, how comfort can mask emptiness, how applause can drown out the heart's questions. I tell people now that success without salvation leaves you restless. You keep upgrading your life, but never your peace. You keep winning, but never resting. I've met people chasing dreams the way I once did. Eyes fixed on the finish line, hearts racing with fear of falling behind. I recognize myself in them, so I whisper what I wish I had heard earlier. Trust God with your steps, not just your plans. Plans change, but His guidance doesn't. I learned that effort matters, but surrender matters more. That striving without trust turns faith into stress. That relying on Allah steadies the heart even when the path bends. Allah doesn't just hand out results. He shapes hearts through the waiting. He refines intention through delay. He teaches gratitude before abundance. Looking back, I see how much I asked for things instead of transformation. I wanted outcomes, not growth, blessings, not balance. But wisdom came when I stopped bargaining and started listening, when I allowed life to teach me instead of resisting its lessons, when I accepted that shaping takes time. Now I measure success differently, not by how high I climb, but by how grounded I remain, not by how loud my name is, but by how quiet my heart can be. Peace has become my compass. If it costs me peace, I question it. If it strengthens my trust, I pursue it with patience. I no longer fear losing what was never truly mine. Whatever Allah gives can stay. Whatever He takes was never meant to define me. The truth is, I wasn't missing more success. I was missing surrender. And once I found that, everything else finally made sense.